Yeah. So like, how do you lack the awareness to be eating poorly, but then not feel the connection of it affecting your body poorly, I guess? Like,
Yeah, I mean, people are cheap. They don't want to invest in
themselves.
even if it. I mean, I get it. Like, I'm not big on food prep either, but I'm definitely not about to be eating, I don't know, kombini chicken like every day or something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not about to do that to myself just because.
But you've got to just feel the impact of that, right? Like, you can't. Is it really possible to just disconnect? Or I don't know, maybe my stomach is particularly weak and.
Yeah, well, the people are just talking about too, like doesn't seem like their digestion is too great either. But
so okay, so she makes poor health decisions and then complains about it and
complains
doesn't want feedback on how to improve.
Yeah.
But okay, so like going back to kind of that idea of identifying with your suffering and almost like enjoying it.
Yeah.
I think like so what is this? Notes from the Underground. There's a section where he's talking about, the old man who is suffering from a rotten tooth, and he like woefully yelps in pain in his bed, in the excruciating agony of it. But in fact, he's enjoying the pain in a weird way, right? Like he's, I don't know, like delighting himself in the agony. Of course, the prose is a lot better than my
like summary.
Yeah,
right?
my summary. But yeah, like what is that? I guess like why is that capacity possible? Because it's really annoying to work with. Actually, like
so annoying, man. It gets way This is just
Do you recognize that capacity within yourself?
I'm sure, but I try not to vent it as to the extent that I can. Even though I probably have in the past, but certainly with health issues. I mean, identifying with health issues seems like a weird, I don't know, weird life choice or something. Even though a lot of people certainly do, but
I mean, so okay, like fat positivity obviously comes to mind. Maybe we'll avoid going down that particular alley at the moment. But yeah, I mean, so at any point you should be able to snap out of your reality tunnel. And make kind of executive decisions.
Keyword is should be able to. But I think a lot of people.
Why is it so difficult?
Aren't able to.
But I mean, I think we all have those inabilities, right? Those blind spots.
Well, I think people aren't being trained in critical thinking, really. So,
do you think it's an issue of you think you'll think your way out of it?
I think critical thinking, as it actually is, rather than what people think it is. Well, I don't think it's being really taught anymore. I think they're just.
I don't think so.
I don't think people are taught to examine.
Well, I mean, it's dangerous. CNN would, or Fox News or whatever, would much rather spoon feed whatever narratives.
So people aren't being confronted or questioned or. Well, I mean, again, like when we were having a break, you just read the list of what Keith was his takes and stuff, and again, I mean, there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, this is like an elitist take," or "This is like a."
Maybe just summarize it for the listener.
Well, just I mean, sort of what we were talking about in the previous cast, where we were talking about doing the work versus you're okay, and I guess like in theory those two approaches are compatible, but I think in practice people who latch onto you're okay or I'm okay, a lot of the time like don't really do the work or do
and so just to maybe add some color to that, the post was basically Keith opened by basically saying that, yeah, you can't serve two masters. Like you either do the practice or you worship the false god or whatever. Phrased differently. But the other guy, Jeremy something, was basically saying like, well, you should be more pragmatic with it, and like, becoming middle class stable is magical, and you're laying the ancestral groundwork for like future growth, and it's about the magician becoming in the world, right? And just kind of like the two can coexist basically, to which Keith says, well, no, you can't.
Sort of can't, yeah.
And that Keith refuses to celebrate someone's advancements into the middle class, because basically in doing so it's actually contradictory to the practice. Contradictory to thelema.
Yeah. Well, I guess like having made it to 40 at this point, I think
congratulations.
I think thanks. Yeah. I'm actually kind of more inclined to Keith's take, just because like people would tell me this like when I was younger. Like I would say like, oh, I want to get good at this now. Like I want to do this thing, or I have to push myself more in this one, whatever it was.
Right.
And a lot of people would be like, oh, you can do that when you're retired, or like you can do that when you're like 50, or like. Wait,
so you'd be telling them that you want to push yourself?
Yeah. So
they'd be like, you can do it later.
Yeah. They'd be like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, don't be too hard on yourself, or like, there's always time to do that. And like, having tried to do things and still doing them is very much like there kind of isn't actually even that much time.
Yeah.
And like if you do try to do things,
you said do
if you do try to complete things at a certain level, it is going to take a huge amount of time and just energy, which is not maybe endlessly available if you're trying to do 101 different other things, and I don't know, live some kind of bourgeois domestic life or something, which is kind of Keith's take, and I think was kind of Crowley's take too, is that attainments in certain areas are kind of incompatible with just being like a, I don't know, successful lawyer with a family or something.
Sure.
Or, being a, I don't know, small businessman with like 6 kids, or, right? Because there's just things that your priorities are you're going to have some priorities. And like, if you choose some, then you sort of like in practice can't really choose others.
Yeah.
But this is still a very unpopular take. And like every time I've tried to, like both in real life and on the internet, every time I've tried to express this, like someone always jumps in and is like, oh, but you can balance it. You can always balance it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, good luck, I guess. But
yeah. It's,
I mean, like this is a perennially unpopular take, but
it's hard to. Yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately you just confront the economic reality first, right? Where like 40 plus hours, let's say 50, including preparation and wind down, goes towards survival tickets, to afford whatever level of lifestyle you're living. Basically, lifestyle tends to creep to become more expensive. And then you're left with, the remaining hours that you can find to do what it feels like you need to do.
Yeah.
And there's a few things it turns out that you feel like you need to do, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other thing is like if you're not like selective with things, it's sort of like that thing where it's like the idea of there being like hobbies or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, at the end of the day, like how many, to me, that term always just implied like you're not like serious about things or something. Because if you have like, 6 different hobbies, presumably you don't really care about any one of them that much, or else you're.
Yeah, I mean, again, why is it a hobby, not a practice?
Well, that's other. I always sort of interpret that term as like an insult. Like if someone calls you like a hobbyist or something, like what, like. don't particularly have any
You're a
hobbies.
casual.
Yeah. You're casual, right? Like, what are you? And again, maybe if you're like a gentleman of leisure and you have no, if you've inherited a fortune or something, then maybe you can just have hobbies or something. But it's a very strange idea. I'm like, what would you? So unless you're just completely focused on your career, and then I don't know, you wind down by playing, I don't know, World of Warcraft or something. That's your hobby, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, in the sense that like people usually mean, where they're like, you can one weekend I don't know, go golfing, and then the next one you like, I don't know, collect stamps or like, I mean, just like what I don't know. It seems it's a weird. I feel like that idea is just sort of like weirdly outdated or something. Because like,
well, I mean, for you and I maybe, but I have friends. Pardon me. I have friends my age who are assembling puzzles, who are playing board games, who are knitting and stuff.
Just blows my mind. I mean, like I definitely believe that's real, but I just, other than like near pathological winding down, by which I would mean just like, I don't know, watching YouTube videos about cats or something, where like you have no real interest in it, nor are you like learning from it. You're literally just turning off your brain because you need to like shift states or something. Yeah. But like I wouldn't really call it like like an interest or a hobby. It's just like downtime drain or whatever.
Yeah.
But like where you like go out of your way to like search out like a board game or something.
Well, I think people just have time, right? I mean, if people are working, like this is another one of these like perennial divides, I guess. Like I've met a few people who don't have a sense of any sort of internal struggle.
Okay, yeah.
And I find it very difficult to relate to them.
Because are they doing much with themselves though?
Yeah. Like this guy was the guy I'm thinking of. I briefly trained Muay Thai with him.
Yeah.
And he was like, he was a fairly skilled fighter. Like I'm not gonna, like at least like amateur competitive fighting level, right? But again, he was just the concept of like having any sort of like internal conflict, just he couldn't relate to at all.
Like with any area of his life, or like
basically.
Was he a software engineer? Or?
I don't know what he's doing for work, to be honest. He wasn't a software engineer. Okay, no. You don't know Lucas, I assume. He's Benji's friend.
Maybe I might have bumped into him at some point.
So if you don't have any sort of internal struggle, then kind of I'm extrapolating from this, then you don't have this feeling of, oh, I should be doing something like with myself right now, right? Like this isn't just time.
But see, this is what software engineer sounds like to me.
Wait. Does that make no, back up.
Does that make sense?
No.
So like this is why I'm always joking with Sherwin, because I'm just like, the thing that you're seemingly interested in,
right,
is also the thing that capitalism rewards.
Sure.
So then I'm like, why do you have any problems?
Right.
Because I'm like, you're getting economically remunerated for something that you're actively outputting energy into, like proactively, that you're like using your skills, and you're getting like, actually remunerated.
If you enjoy it, then if you enjoy it, then.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, so for me, that's why I'm just always joking around with him, because I'm just like, draw on the power of the software. Like, I'm like, you have no problems. You have no problems. You're getting, right. So I'm just, obviously it's not probably how it feels, but
right.
I mean, I'm just saying from the outside, like that's what it, like people that are actually interested in things they're getting paid for, it like a job or something, that like that's what it like seems like. It doesn't seem like you would really have any
Yeah.
terribly many immediate problems. And then correspondingly, you probably could go home and be like, oh, I'm going to like get into like board games or something, right? Because it's like I have available hours that, you know, I don't have to like squeeze in that software engineering once I'm tired from like working in the mine or something. You're right.
Yeah,
Like, you're
yeah.
not having to like, like stack it on top of some other annoying thing that you have like no, it basically just wastes time, right? Or kills time.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, if I don't know necessarily if your economic profitability being aligned with an industry of interest is the direct path to happiness, I guess, right?
Well, I'm not saying it's necessarily happiness, but I was just saying like that's what like you were talking about this Lucas dude where like presumably he has some setup where, well, I don't know. I mean,
I have no idea.
I don't know anything about him
very well
I was
either.
just sort of questioning if that's what.
But yeah, I mean, more recently, a friend's wife was also like that. She was also one of these people who didn't have a identifiable internal monologue.
Okay, yeah. That's a bit mysterious because it's sort of like what it gets in a very, I want to say like epistemological territory where you're like, well, how can we know they don't have a?
Well, I kind of don't believe them, right?
Well, that's what, yeah. So that's what it like, in the sense that like, do we believe them because we sort like?
I believe that maybe you don't notice it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe, I mean, it's one of these things where like, apparently like the, biological male brain.
Biological males, yeah.
Is, like the vision operates basically by identifying, objects moving.
Okay.
But the, biological female brain identifies things visually as like shapes and patterns.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a fundamental difference in processing of like the visual field.
Yeah.
And interestingly, this kind of corresponds nicely with hunter versus gatherer type thing, because if you're a gatherer, then identifying patterns and colors, you know, the subtle berry.
I mean, this is one of those things where I'd like to see a lot of research on this, and I'm sure there is research, but I'm sort of skeptical of that too.
Yeah.
But I mean, like any of these things where they're like, I mean, you know, some people will say like, you know, women have better biological women or biological females.
I think we can just say females.
Biological females have, you know, better verbal intelligence. I'm like, well, maybe statistically, maybe, but I'm always, or, you know, any kind of claim, you know, like males, biological males are better at functioning this. I'm always very, you know, are these results repeatable, or like, are they,
it's also very bell curvy.
Is it culture?
Stuff, right?
Is it, the other thing is it
True.
culturally dependent? Because, you know, some cultures, they've shown that like, even like estimating like how long like a square is or something, or like some cultures have like very analyze things visually very differently than like, you know, Western kind of cultures do. So yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical of all that stuff too, but certainly, yeah, the people that say they like don't have, well, there's people that claim they can't like, they don't have any visual consciousness, I guess, like
like they
aphantasic or whatever,
visualize an object.
They can't visualize anything, right? Yeah. So
who do we know who said that? I think
there's Zan.
Zan. Yeah,
he was talking about that with me once, and he was trying to explain it, and I sort of was at first. I was like, well,
he also said he doesn't have a monologue, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think he said his mind's like very blank at all times.
Yeah,
basically.
and at first I think the first thing I did tell him was like, A, I don't believe you, and then B, it was just like, well, tell me about it, right? Because I mean, I guess I want to believe you, but or at least I'm interested, but
how did he explain not aphantasia or whatever?
Well, this is a few years ago when he was telling me about it, but yeah, so it just seems to be that he doesn't like picture or visualize things in his mind, I guess. So he can think of things, but I guess he doesn't like internally see them, I guess, with his mind's eye, I guess. Or I guess he doesn't have a mind's eye in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's just mind-blowing to me because, like, what I always do is I visualize a map, right?
Okay,
like, I can visualize the map of this area roughly. Yeah. And I mean, it's very, like, patchworky where I'll, like, load, you know, this block, and then I can be like, okay, well, down this block, right? But I can't, I don't necessarily see it all at once, right? But I can kind of recall it as I go. So to not be able, I mean, you have a Google Maps app, right? Like, how many times have you looked at like the streets of Shibuya, and then you can't visualize it? Like, what? I don't know.
I sort of get it because I was trying to, I was with a Japanese person today, and I was trying to write kanji from memory, and like, there's common kanji that I could easily read and recognize, but like they just would not come into my mind.
Yeah, it's actually a
different system maybe. And once I got once I remembered them, I was like, oh yeah, I remember it. And I just easily, write it. But so I always find that's one reason I do find kanji very frustrating is just the trying to import them into visual memory. Which I think is a thing, but so yeah, I don't know what claiming you have no inner vision, I guess, or there's an interesting Australian writer called Gerald Murnane, very strange writer. I think he's been nominated for the Nobel Prize a bunch of times. He's probably considered the most, like next level living Australian writer. I think he's about like 82 or something now. But all of his books are like very concerned with this kind of stuff, and like he interesting character because he's like never left his home state of Victoria in Australia. And he says that like if he finds himself in places, if he physically finds himself in locations where he can't mentally like he calls it like getting his bearings,
right? Yeah,
which is so he said like he visualizes like like a grid, and then if he can't reconstruct where he knows he is, like he starts like flipping out kind of, or at least like he'll not be comfortable. So like, so he had like, he was giving one, I think it was an essay or something where he was describing like, they went on some school trip or something and he like, like he lost his bearings and he was trying to like mentally draw the map and he like, it turned out like his mental map was wrong when he later consulted a real map. He's like, how could this be, right? Like, so he's very concerned with this kind of like internal like bearings of things and like know representing like where he is at any time and like where he like almost to like a autistic level and like
sounds like it. Yeah,
I think it kind of is like on that spectrum, but but yeah, I mean, it's really territory that he's like super going over again and again, and trying to like visualize things in writing and like. So there's another one where he one of his books where he's saying he's describing books that he read as a child and almost like he wasn't concerned with the plot or the characters, but with like the backgrounds, right? Like the settings of, stories or novels that he would like imagine exploring in like great detail. So if you would read some, description of like a, I don't know, farmhouse or something, he would like mentally visualize being there.
Right.
And then like try to go to like the outskirts and like see what would like be there. So he's just describing. This is why, I mean, it's very mental stuff, right? Like, so he's describing like in every sense of the word, right? So he's describing just like these imaginary landscapes based on just like reading things or like, you know, exploring what, and so according to him, he thinks they're like actually like real. So he thinks that like imaginary landscapes, like, you know, in kind of like an occult sense, he thinks they're like equally real to like what we would, you know, see around us, or sort of like that. Yeah.
Well, and that's the point that my friend was making about his Guru GPT thing, where it's like, okay, well, this is an entity that exists on some plane of existence,
level,
right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, interestingly, like I feel like I have a very bad sense of direction because I'm constantly getting lost, and but I feel like I feel like once I do know places, like I can definitely like mentally reconstruct them to the point where I probably could draw like a semi-accurate map, at least to a point where it would like sort of have some correspondence. But so I think that's probably a spectrum too, where like some people can intensely visualize like, you know, physical space and you know, maps and stuff. And
yeah, I mean, I would say I'm quite well oriented.
Okay,
strong sense of direction.
Sexually oriented, right? Sexually
in all orientations.
Quite well oriented, right? Yeah.
That too, yeah. But yeah, I mean, even like cardinal directions.
Okay,
I'd say like cardinal directions I'm most aware of at all times.
I'm just totally blank out. Yeah. See, I feel like I have like zero sense of that.
But I mean, just rises in the east, sets in the west, right? Like that's all it is, right?
Yeah. But I still feel like I'm like, oh wait, like, yeah, again, this comes up in doing occult stuff too, because like directions are really important, right? So you're supposed to, like some things you're supposed to face the east, or you're supposed to face, right? So I'm just like, oh wait, it's the other way. Oh, so I'm like, oh fuck, like, I'm just constantly losing track of it, right? And like, is this north or like, right. So I feel like I don't instinctively have a good.
No, I mean, I feel like I have a compass inside me where it's like, okay, once I'm oriented, if I turn around and take a few turns, I'll still like, I'll just check the compass direction.
Okay,
right?
Yeah. I feel like that's something so maybe that's what Zan is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the equivalent, because I definitely don't feel like I have that to much of a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, so I mean, even sometimes in the station that I go to every day, I'm like, oh wait, it's this way, or like,
well, we had that just now, right?
Yeah, well, because it's just because I'm approaching it from a direction I normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
So my brain is just like, oh, what, we're here? Like what? Like this feels like you just teleported in or something, and you know, like normally. Yeah. So I guess like maybe through that analogy, like I sort of get what Zan might, or you know, people that claim they don't have a visual sense at all. But I mean, it still seems very strange. But
right.
Or hard to understand, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, to me that does seem very similar to saying like, I don't perceive that there are any problems or something, right? Because it's like, well, if you're not visualizing things, like how are you like thinking? I guess like it doesn't seem like you would even be kind of thinking. Maybe.
Yeah, and same thing with not having an internal monologue, where it's like, are you reasoning if you don't have a monologue?
Yeah,
and kind of goes back to a point from Robert Anton Wilson where he basically said that that reasoning and vocalization are the same thing.
They are, or they aren't?
They are.
Oh, they are.
Yeah. That basically like the reasoning circuit of the mind is also the vocalizing circuit.
Okay, yeah.
That these two processes are basically, you know, two sides of the same coin or something.
That gets into
semantic time binding, right?
That gets into kind of occult territory too. I mean, that would be like, I guess like on the Tree of Life would be like Hold, or like the, you know, the Mercury one.
Sure.
Where it's like language and, you know, kind of reason and flowing thoughts, you know, almost like liquid mercury.
Yeah.
Like the Terminator or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that gets kind of in the occult territory a bit too. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's a territory I don't. Yeah, like you can visualize the tree of life, right?
Yeah,
I
but I had
can't.
to put a lot of time and thought into doing that. So at first I'm like, oh, where's Netzach or whatever?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
where's like what? Now I can just see it in my mind
Yeah.
and visualize it. Well, that's
So
what.
maybe that's all it is, really, because I kind of I don't know where Mercury is, right? I mean, I know it's the kind of balls, basically, right? But
Yeah,
the balls
it's
and the lines,
the
right?
balls and the lines. Yes,
Yeah.
balls and lines. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where like a lot of occult practices do involve intense visualization to like build up the kind of spirit vision or other inner eye of perceiving things.
Have you felt like you've developed I don't know, a stronger inner eye, basically?
Yeah. I would say I have over time.
So like from where to where did it go, type of thing?
I always felt like I was all right, but I think having to put conscious effort or will into like visualize like a red triangle or visualize a cube and then rotate it in your mind. I mean, much like with yoga, like it's kind of harder than it would seem, I guess, if you try to sit there.
I mean,
doing it.
The main thing for me is I can visualize stuff in a flash, but to like really get into it is very
go through it.
Unnatural, I guess. Like in a flash, I can visualize anything. I feel right,
but like I think that exercise is like maintaining
it,
like focusing only on one object, and like holding it constant in your mind, and then like rotating it, or like moving it around, or like doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's quite challenging.
So yeah, there's that side of it, as well.
Yeah.
Like but the thing with inner monologues is also not having them sounds. I always feel like there's just too much crap happening in my mind at the same time. Like at any one time, there's like about 20 different things.
Yeah.
There's music playing.
Yep.
There's like objects moving around. There's like monologues. There's like other other crazy simultaneous things happening.
It's for me. It's different lines of thought and music probably are the two kind of main things. Random memories coming up.
Yeah, random memories. Yeah,
random access memories.
I've noticed too that if you don't, it's almost a bit like withdrawal. Like I noticed that if you don't listen to any music for long enough, then your mind will start like just playing it. Like even things you haven't listened to for like, at least for me, like I'll start remembering, songs I haven't heard for like 5 years or something. It'll just randomly come out of nowhere. It's like the mind is sort of like, what? There's no music withdrawal. We need to manufacture it or something.
Manufacture some funk.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Almost to the point where I'm like, this sort of is like a mental impediment. Because like I've gotten to the point where I'm like, actually, like music isn't that important, and kind of don't always need it in my mind or something. Where it's kind of like having a cigarette always in your mouth or something. Sort of like can just quiet your mind and don't need to be.
Yeah, well, that's the annoying thing of like all the like energy being wrapped up in unconstructive mental processes. Right? Like anxiety is probably the kind of most obvious example of this, where it's like you're actually spending a lot of resources
on like nothing usually, like literally nothing.
Well, usually something negative, right? Like usually
negative
something
or
unconstructive that's holding you back, right?
Yeah.
But unwinding that and accessing that and putting that energy to use on something more useful is actually quite difficult.
Yeah.
And
if you get sucked into energy loops of thinking about things which likely don't even have much to do with you, I don't know, fossil fuels or something.
Yeah.
Which I guess is something people worry about. But you're certainly not going to affect the global supply of, I don't know, oil or something. Right? So I mean, it's like, is this something you would really should worry about? I guess. But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, kind of going back to maybe the like people who don't have a sense of internal struggle. Like, I guess for them, it's like, oh, I want to do something, and oh, I do it, or oh, I didn't do it. I guess I didn't want to do it in the first place, right?
Oh, they just kind of roll with the punches or whatever.
I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine what that's like, I guess, right?
It's interesting. There's interesting material from Carlos Castaneda where he thought that the mind was like it's very like L. Ron Hubbard territory where he thought it was like a parasite, right? So according to him, there's these like alien parasites that give us their minds. So he's like, their minds are, elaborate and anxiety ridden because they're worried about being discovered, right? So but he's saying like it's not really our minds, it's just this like parasite mind, and once you get rid of it, then your mind is just like quiet and there's nothing there.
Can just focus on being a primate.
I guess, yeah. I guess.
I mean, sign me up. What do I do?
Yeah, we got.
How do I rid myself of this?
Do Carlos's magical? I think he's got like 12 books or something of teachings of Don Juan. Have you heard of these? The teachings of Don Juan.
Don Juan is the guy who fought the windmill, right?
Don Quixote.
Okay, my bad.
Well, Don Juan is a famous like lover, but
okay, that's
But the Castaneda one is supposedly. I mean, again, this is very like it's kind of like a hoax, right? But he was like this graduate student in like I don't know 1969 or something. So he's doing anthropology research. So he turns in this thesis where he's like, yeah, like I was, researching these like, traditional plants, herbs used by these like Yaqui Indians in, I don't know, Mexico or wherever. And I met this like old Indian called Don Juan, and he started telling me about, traditional Mexican shamanism, and told me, how I could like become like a bird and like fly and like enter like another reality, right? So the the Department of Anthropology is like, wow, Carlos, like that's kind of interesting, like most of our anthropology students aren't turning into birds and entering separate realities, right? But yeah, this is wild stuff, like we might just like publish it, right? He's like, please do, right? So they publish his thesis is like this book, right? And it becomes this huge bestseller. And he so he sets himself up as like this, kind of like L. Ron Hubbard dude, right? So he gets all these, he moves in this big house, and he's got like about, I don't know, 7 or 8 women all living with him. And they're just going on magical journeys like all day, every day. And he's just running he's got tons of money coming in from the books, right? So he doesn't really have to do anything. So he's just like, so he gives them all, titles, right? He's like, you're like Hummingbird Warrior, and like you're the Blue Scout or whatever, because in a dream I saw you arrive from like another dimension. He's just going on this like magical odyssey for like 20 years or something, right? And, new people are coming in and out all the time. But it's basically just him and like about 8 women or something who kind of, some of them leave and some of them come back, and then so he gets a bit on in years, right? And
what, sorry?
Well, he gets a bit older,
okay,
like he because so it gets to like the 1990s, and he's like, I don't know, 70 or something. So he's like, I think old Carlos is gonna ascend to the next stage of existence soon, right? So eventually, I think he just dies of like cancer or something. so then all the they called them like the witches, right? That lived with them. They all suddenly just like vanish off the face of the earth, right? Like they're just like all gone, right? There's like 7 or 8 women that had families and like parents and brothers and sisters, right? So naturally, people are like, well, where'd they go? Like, did he kill them, or like, did they kill themselves? Like, did they just go to an island or something? Like, what happened to them, right? So this was a big mystery, and like, and they found like one of their cars like out in the desert, and they found some like human remains, right? So one of them seemingly died in the desert. That's all they could find, right? And they couldn't find anything from any of the other ones, right? And then I think like just earlier this year, like a few months ago, this investigative journalist was like digging really deep, right? He was like, I'm gonna find these witches, right?
Right.
And so he dug super, he's like calling old phone numbers and snooping around for like, I don't know, 3 years or something. And I mean, it's a really long story, but eventually he got on the trail. Well, because one question was like, where's the money, right? Because Carlos's books are bringing in like millions and millions. He's like kind of Eckhart Tolle level,
right?
And there like wasn't really much trail of it. So they're like, well, like these books are still being published, and like his bank balance at the time of his death was like, it was just like 1 million or something. But in theory, it should have been more like 100 or something, 100 million instead of like 1. So this journalist was like, well, this doesn't make sense, and like right. So his theory was that these witches were like still secretly alive, and the one they found in the desert was just one that they didn't like. So presumably they killed her and then staged it to look like it was, like a suicide or something.
Right.
And then they just like took the money and went on their merry way, right? And at the end, like the long story short, like at the very end of this very lengthy article, he actually did find one of them, and she was just living in some like really nice mansion in like Beverly Hills or something. And she opened the door and saw him, and he was like, "Oh, Patricia," and then she just closed the door, and then that's it, right? So he couldn't get any. I mean, he couldn't get further than that. But
it seems like it was figured out, basically.
Yeah, it seems like it was figured out. So presumably the other witches are also
in similar positions,
just living off Carlos's funds or whatever. Yeah, which fair enough, because he did a lot of weird shit to them and made them.
They earned it.
They probably earned it.
I mean, if they got access to the money, I guess then
it's kind of a cool story though, right?
Play. Yeah,
kind of interesting. Because you would think like, okay, like you first saw it. I remember when this wasn't. I remember I did read this in the 90s, and everyone was just like, oh, they obviously just all killed themselves, right?
Why would they do that?
Well, because Carlos ascended to the next level, so they want to follow him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when was Heaven's Gate?
Like 5 years before this.
Okay, so kind of
context. So you think that you figure they vanished,
or take the money and live it up.
It turns out they took the money and lived it up, right? Kind of interesting. Except for that one, which so the one they found that was dead apparently was like Carlos's favorite. So like all the other ones didn't like her. Right? And so they're like, all right, we're gonna get rid of her, and then we can just take the, I guess, money and run, right? Which I guess they did. So interesting story.
Carlos, what's his last name?
Castañeda.
Again? Okay.
He's originally Peruvian, I think. Really interesting books. But so he thought the anxious mind was like a predator from outer space that's traditional, what he called traditional Mexican sorcerers. But I mean, he's just basically making this up. I mean, as like anthropologically, like he's totally misidentifying things, and so he kind of just made up this Don Juan character to seem like it was legit. Interesting books though. I mean, it's still worth reading, but got to interpret them how you will, I guess.
I mean, anxiety as a parasite, certainly. I mean, it is definitely like passed down from your parents and stuff. Like,
well, probably genetically.
Genetically, you think? I think. Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, it's probably just both, right?
I would say it's probably just genetics.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think there's any. I mean, I would say some
feel
people
like it's more just like internalized behavior, if I had to guess.
I think it's just.
This kind of thing is like stress management isn't ever taught explicitly.
True, so but some people, but then you're still left with a question like, why do some people have more stress to manage than other people? So,
why do people have more stress to manage?
Why would some people? So even if you, I feel like even if you,
again, the internal struggle, right? The sense of internal struggle, right?
Yeah, but I would argue that's probably genetically.
You think it's genetically defined?
I would say it's probably just genes rather than.
I don't know. I mean, like I feel a lot comes from like overly critical parents, basically.
Well, it can, but
like it's like the mind basically constructs an inner critic that is one notch stronger than an external.
That's what Freud called an introject, which is like an internalized voice of like a parent or something. It's like criticizing.
Yeah.
You shouldn't kill people. Stop killing them.
Well, yeah.
Stop, Johnny, stop. And you're like, I can't. I have to keep killing them. And then raping their corpses. I can't stop, Dad. I'm sorry. Stop this. What are you doing, bro? Stop. Stop, Ted Bundy.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe
Ted definitely wasn't stopping.
Yeah, maybe he didn't have that sense of internal struggle.
Yeah. Sorry to know it.
Because I'm just living it up and raping and murdering as I please, right?
Yeah. Did you know that he blamed it all on pornography?
Oh, that's funny.
And
metal music.
No, I think he said it like they.
What porn did you have access to at the time?
Well, some there's one of these like fundamentalist Christian pastors or whatever, like interviewed him the night before he was executed, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like Ted, will you come to Jesus?" And Ted's like, "Yes, I will." Right. So then he's like, "Well, Ted, like, can you share your, in your final hours here, can you share your story with us? And, if there's anything cautionary that could maybe prevent any young people from going down the same path, right? So, what made you commit these awful crimes, right?" And Ted's like, pornography. He's like, when I was a kid, like I discovered erotic magazines and just got too sucked into them and started killing people. So
one thing led to another.
So so needless to mention, most people are like, "Come on, Ted, like this is fuck off, like what, like what, like that." Okay, like it makes no sense, but Pastor, what was his name? Pastor James was like, "So there you have it, kids. Dangers of pornography." Right?
It's like a bad like Mr. Rogers episode or
something. That's pretty much what it. I mean, you can watch this interview on YouTube, and Ted is doing his best to seem like he's sorry, because he's hoping they're gonna like pardon him at the last minute or something. I don't know what he was hoping for, but he's trying to seem like sincere. And, he's like, "Oh yeah, like I hope no one else goes down this awful path.
Right.
If we just stay away from that pornography, then no one need ever die." Or like, yeah. So I guess Ted's internal voice wasn't doing its job.
I guess not. Yeah. Yeah. How do we get on this internal critic? Yeah, so I mean, you internalize the voice of an external critic, and it becomes an internal critic, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is a learned behavior rather than
yeah, but I feel like
source of stress.
I feel like probably tendency towards stress or anxiety is probably has a heavy. I feel like it has a probably heavy genetic.
Interesting.
Genetic component.
But I mean, I wonder if it's like epigenetic, where it's
maybe, yeah.
You know, it's a pattern of behavior that became encoded in certain activated genes, right? And yeah, you know, you're born and your amygdala is like twice the size of someone else's or whatever. Or
it's hard to say, yeah. But I remember when I was in kindergarten, like my parents told me later, like they said, like, you know, my kindergarten teacher was like within the first, I don't know, like few weeks or whatever, she was like, oh, like, is anything wrong at home? Because this kid is like seems really stressed out and kind of like way too anxious, and you know, is there any like strife at home? And my parents were like no, like we're just, you know, pretty nothing seemed to be too the matter, you know. So they're like, oh really, like what, why does he seem stressed out? You know? Like they and even now they're sort of like, what, like they didn't really like nothing to, you know, no one was throwing things, or you know, nothing was too stressful, I guess.
I mean, was there a stressful undercurrent, stuff not being said, right?
It's hard to say, man, but I feel like a lot of it probably is just genetic, I would say.
Interesting.
I think, I mean, there probably is there's certainly a learn component, but I feel like I increasingly just err on the side of a lot of it's probably just genes or something, weird genes or something.
Yeah, for me, it seems purely behavioral.
If it's
basically,
behavioral,
yeah. I mean, just patterns of people behaving in certain ways.
Okay, yeah.
Things not being communicated correctly or at all.
Well, but so, do you think that like if you'd been like adopted by complete, like, do you feel you'd be like?
Question.
Do you feel that you'd be like a completely different person?
It's a good question. Yeah,
because that's what that would seem like. That's what that would seem to imply. Because like if you were.
I don't know about completely different, but yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have like picked up certain habits or something.
Well, true, but do you think that you would have ended up? Well, because they've done like they have done these like identical twin studies where like one gets adopted.
But don't they always find that it's like 50-50? Basically, it's like nature and nurture.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's both, but
like there's stuff that's like weirdly genetic, basically, where someone who is a twin but in a completely different circumstance
has like a very similar life anyway, despite you know having totally different upbringing.
Right.
I would say like my take is probably about 60-40 in favor of genetics, I would say.
Interesting.
So there probably is like a pretty non-trivial nurture influence, right? But I feel like Ted, like, I don't know, probably would have become a serial killer no matter what you
no matter what,
how you raised him or something, because it doesn't seem like his background was terribly abusive, you know. There's nothing from what I can remember, there was nothing that was like too, like, no one, you know, like nothing like I don't know, abusive or terribly out of the ordinary. And it certainly wasn't the porn. So I mean, like, so what, I mean, like, where's that come from, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't really seem to come from anywhere, right? I mean, so other than, I don't know, weird genes, although like apparently Jeffrey Dahmer, so you know that his there's another, you know, dude who killed people and then violated their corpses and you know, kept them in his apartment and stuff, right? So so Jeffrey Dahmer's father wrote a book. And he was like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, like, I also had like inappropriate thoughts, but I was just like able to control them. So like, and you know, I haven't read it, but apparently apparently his father was talking about, you know, like having these like really kind of like psycho thoughts, but he was always able to like step outside of it and just be like, oh, this is kind of crazy. Like, I'd better just like think about something else or something. But they would like
watch some pornography.
Yeah, better watch some normal pornography rather than, I don't know. Yeah, but so he did say that, like, you know, because they would ask him, they'd be like, oh, can you can you possibly imagine why Jeffrey did this? And he'd be like, actually, like, I sort of can. Like, that's kind of the scary part is like, I sort of can, but I was able to, like, not obviously express it.
Right.
So I guess for Jeffrey, like, he just was able to express it. But he did say, like, he had to sort of like according to Jeffrey, he sort of had to like consciously give into it. So he sort of like he definitely like knew what he was doing was like, wrong. But he'd be like, oh, if I get drunk, then I'll be able to just roll with it.
Yeah.
And just
interesting.
I'll be able to override the,
so like he weirdly wanted to do it.
So he apparently just wanted it so much that he was like, I got to override my, thing and then just go into it. Right.
Yeah, that's bizarre. Yeah. That's another layer on top of it. Right. Where does that come from? Right.
Well, but that's how
the desire to override it come from.
Yeah. Right? Well, but that's how he described it. He was like, like, I know that giving into this is crazy and wrong, but like, I sort of want to. So like, how can I do that? And he's like, well, I basically just got to get blind drunk and then just do it. Right.
Right.
And, which he did. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, so that would seem to be genetic, I guess, because his dad is literally saying, like, I get where my own son was coming from.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's like on some axis of like, I don't know, psychosis or something, or schizophrenia or something, right? I mean, some like
there's a genetic component to that, heavily genetic, apparently.
Genetic component to I don't know, some intrusive thought kind of pathology, right?
Well, certainly schizophrenia. Well, that's why they used to like. I mean, it's very like politically incorrect, but they used to like, like
sterilize.
Well, no, they would just describe this as like hereditary madness or something. So they thought that like madness could be like run in families, which if you classify schizophrenia as madness, then okay, maybe. But I mean, there are factors and things which do have these certainly strong genetic basis, I guess. So something to that, including apparently being a serial killer to some extent. According to, Mr. Dahmer and his son there.
But so there's that. And then, but did you hear about this thing maybe last year of like teenage girls giving themselves
Tourette's or something?
Tourette's through TikTok.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's like, I guess that's
kind of interesting too, right?
I guess that would be classified as under the broad heading of mass hysteria, which doesn't mean what it seems like it means. So I think if you hear that term now, you imagine like riots or something, but it actually means like, well, basically that, like transmissible psychosomatic diseases, basically. Like, well, I mean, the classic example they give is like witchcraft hysteria, where you're like, where you start looking around the town and you're like, this town is filled with witches. We got to root them out and kill them, right?
Yeah,
and then that's what happens, right? So
the cord there.
So that's one example from history where that definitely happened, and many innocent people were killed because people started flipping out about there being witches, right?
And that's just kind of like contagious paranoia or something.
Well, there's another one in I'm trying to remember if it was Nigeria, but it's like well, that's the other thing, is that a lot of these are like culturally specific. So there's this one in I think it was Nigeria, I could be wrong, where people started becoming paranoid that witches were shrinking their penises.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
And then like it kind of turned into the same thing, where it's like, we got to find these witches, we got to kill them, right? Because they're like shrinking our junk, right?
It's can't stand for that.
Can't stand for that, right? And it's like, look, it's like smaller, like it's smaller than it was. Like what's happening, right? It's obviously these witches, right, are doing this, right? And And you're like, how would you, like, I don't even know how you would, but I mean, it caught on, right? And
yeah, caught on.
people are like, oh, it's happening to me too. And like, we gotta kill them and find it and stop it, right? This is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have to like, psychologists have to like look at this and be like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is happening here?
Yeah.
This is crazy, right? Like,
yeah, I guess it just sounds outlandish if you're not caught up in it. Or if you're too far outside it. Yeah, I mean, or like, like getting Tourette's from a
video or something.
Yeah,
right?
from a dance video platform.
Yeah,
right? It's pretty bizarre as well.
Well, that's what they do classify that as like a mass hysteria, I guess, which is like a I think even that term is outdated now. I mean, that's annoying. The annoying thing with psychology is that they like, it's like worse than wokeness because they change the words for everything like every 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, nervous illness doesn't mean what it used to, and hysteria, like we don't say hysteria anymore. We say, and it's like, okay, well, unless you're in this field, like you can't really know what anyone's talking about because they change it every fucking.
It reminds me of like university textbooks where like basically, every year they would release the new edition and they would just like move one chapter to like another. And just justify, the next generation.
Well,
of students to repurchase everything, right?
Well, so like, like the DSMV, which is like the
Diagnostic Service Manual. Or whatever.
So they're constantly. That's another. Well, because even
but they just make up illnesses, basically.
They do.
Right?
Well, I mean, but like you consider that like, not too long ago, homosexuality was considered like a nervous illness. So.
Yeah,
I mean, like they're having like culture and changes, and you're having to constantly shuffle like what. Well, if you read the this is actually a book I would recommend reading because it's actually an amazing book filled with crazy epic stories. It's a book from I think like 1940 called Mask of Sanity, which is where he. I think his name is Harvey Cleckley, where he he's the first one to like use the term psychopath, if I remember right, or at least kind of really try to define it. And the way he analyzes it and defines it is like totally different from like what we would think now. So like now we think that it's almost like an advantage, right? We're like, like if you want to get ahead in this company, you gotta be psychopathic and can't be limited. But so like it's almost gotten this like good connotation. But according to Cleckley, like it's just totally lacking, and like being a psychopath is like basically like the inability to have goals almost. Like he defines it as like
it's like purely impulsive.
Well, so he's saying that like psychopaths don't have coherent inner goals and like they can't, right? So they're just like constantly.
Well, it's like just pure ids at all times.
Well, yeah, sort of. And so he's saying that they're like trivial, right? So like they'll do things which like from the outside seem like self-defeating. So like they'll get married and then at their wedding they'll start like seducing their wife's best friend, and then their life blows up, and they're just, and you ask them why they did it, and they're just like, I don't know, just seemed like the thing to do, right? So he's saying they lack inner reflection and goals. So according to his definition, there's like no upshot to being a psychopath. Yeah. Because you don't have goals, right?
Well, so I mean, are these the same people who are, murderers?
He's saying they can be murderers, but just like more likely, they're just almost like just annoying people because like, well, again, like if someone has no,
just say short-sighted short-sighted and impulsive.
Well,
right?
but
I
again,
mean,
like he in analyzing, you know, because he's trying to construct this, you know,
Right.
with very technical, you know, models of like motivation and you know everything, right? So, but it's a fascinating book, and he does give, you know, he includes like really funny and bizarre stories of like real life psychopaths that he you know dealt with, and usually it was like, you know, their family would be like, you know, what the fuck's wrong with you know cousin Ed, like he's just, you know, what, and
yeah.
so he would have to like, you know, make sense of like what is, you know, going on in these situations. But yeah, I think that term is totally different from how it would be used today. Maybe. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, I think we can land this.
We can wrap it.
Yeah.
Time for some donuts.
Time for donuts. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was an interesting exploration on inner worlds.
Inner worlds.
Yeah.
Might return to that next time, maybe.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us
again.
Justin Isis 93 on Instagram and Justin Isis 1 on X.
And DBLV on Instagram.
All right.
Have a nice week.
Have a nice week.
Bye.